Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the MICROSAIC Systems PLC investor presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. It can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we'll notify you once these are ready for your review. We'd also like to remind you this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Glenn Tracy, CEO, and Bevan Metcalfe, CFO of MICROSAIC Systems PLC. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. Thank you to all for attending this presentation. What we're going to do today is just talk to you about the announcement we put out this week about our collaboration with Swansea University, but actually give you a wider update and set the context about that whole market in environmental health, and then also give you an update on the business. So I'm Glenn Tracy, the CEO, and sitting next to me is Bevan Metcalfe, the FD. What I'm going to do now is just turn the screen off, because I know some of you are on devices and you can see the slides a little clearer, but we'll come back on just shortly to take the Q&A. Okay, the usual disclaimer. Okay, so what I will do first is just give you a reminder, really, of MICROSAIC's strategy. This is the second call we've had like this, so I think it's a great idea to give you a good overview of what we're about. Now, really, MICROSAIC's old business model focused on simple lab analysis, and that was a model where it was business-to-business transaction of a box, not a complete solution. And often we didn't see the end user or understand their problem. At the top of that picture, you can see that we're shifting now at speed towards remote screening and monitoring. And that's where we can make a difference to real world problems. And that means we can shift the power of high-end detection technology, which was once limited to the centralized lab, towards a much more dispersed or nodal detection model at the point of need. Now, what does that mean? But basically, it enables us to empower decision making much more where it's needed and by the people who need it. The kinds of markets we're serving, we've got market verticals in human health, environmental health, and in diversified. In human health, we're building some very nice end-to-end coverage in this vertical. And I think it's fair to say we're gaining ever more acceptance and validation across a growing range of applications. We have solution-enabled lab analysis. Our technology here is being used to help pharma companies with traditional drug development. We've got online monitoring for drug manufacture. And that's going to be really big for us, whether for traditional drugs or new biologics, such as vaccines or monoclonal treatments. And if we look at the events of last year, I think it's been demonstrated that new pharmaceuticals can be brought to market using what the pharma industry calls concurrent or parallel processes. And that's only going to mean much more demand for our proposition, where the decision is really needed at the point of need, as we say. So decision making, we haven't got years to get a product to market, we've got a year. By 2022, we'll see a move to patient-side companion diagnostics, which we are really excited about, and perhaps more crucially, our first medical approval. In environmental health, well, actually, I'm going to be talking about that in much more detail through the presentation. But this year we'll be delivering a complete range of solutions for soil and water screening and monitoring, particularly for pollutants affecting human health. And as I say, I'll come on to that during the presentation. Diversified, that covers a range of industries that really reflect high value markets. This could be in food analysis, and you may have seen a tweet that we put out, those of you that follow us on Twitter or indeed LinkedIn, that we've just had a great installation at Syngenta in crop science. Okay, so let's spend a little time to consider the context around human health and why our technology is so timely to solve I think what I would call is a pervasive problem now, and B, where a decent amount of centralized funding is now happening. Now, I think, like me, we probably all go about our normal day-to-day lives making an individual assessment on our environment based on what we contact, so what we see, what we smell, etc. And I mentioned the word pervasive, and what the diagram at the top of this slide attempts to show is how widespread pollutants spread from their source, and that tracking and monitoring of those pollutants is actually a very complex science. So, for example, you can see there you've got smokestacks emitting smoke from industry, and that can take pollutants miles into the atmosphere and then carried hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles actually, before they fall to ground, generally in the form of some precipitate. And suddenly, obviously, a local problem becomes a global one, where you're affecting your neighbors. And sticking with the industrial theme, regulated or non-regulated industry releases into wastewater treatment, one, can only be treated for knowns, and two, unplanned or unknown escapes where there's no treatment can actually percolate very deep into the ground and drain for hundreds of miles again into surface water systems. And incidentally, of course, that's where we take our drinking water. And then complexity is added. Complexity is added as the chemicals or pollutants themselves can change depending on what they're exposed to. So, for example, other chemicals or indeed UV light, sunshine. Critically, the buildup in the environment, especially in apex organisms, that compromises our food chain, and then obviously that affects human health. Now, this is a global problem. A report from the UN recently, there are some figures here, suggested that 80% of wastewater globally flows back into the ecosystem untreated. It's a staggering number. Industry is responsible for around 20% of that global wastewater. And actually, globally, only 60% of water bodies deem themselves as having good water quality. Now, since the 1990s, much of the planet has improved, but there are parts of the planet that is getting worse: Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So let's not be downbeat. On the right-hand side at the bottom, you can see that actually globally, this is a phenomenon that's recognized, and we are doing things about it. And you can see that governments are sinking billions into this to tackle the crisis in the short, medium, and long term. So I think really, in summary, we recognize that water pollution is a problem for health, and on a massive scale for health and the economy. And we also recognize that dealing with it is complex. And I refer to one of my favorite business sayings, only what gets measured gets managed. And I think that really refers exactly to our technology. By applying powerful detection at the point of need, which is small, simple, easy to use, and can be installed at multiple points, we intend to have a prolific footprint in environmental detection. Now, I'm zoning more in now into the PFAS side of things, because this came out in the announcement this week. And this is a pollutant that's attracting a lot of attention. It's actually a catch-all for many chemicals, which are called, and I'll try and say it, perfluorinated or polyfluorinated alkyl substances. And in fact, it's estimated there's about between 5,000 and 10,000 separate chemicals on the planet now. They're man-made. They were developed in the 1950s, and actually they're really very useful chemicals, particularly popular for non-stick and water resistance properties, and they are used pretty much ubiquitously. They're on the clothes we wear, the products we put on our skin, can you believe, and also the packaging that contains our food. The trouble is, the bonds in these chemicals are some of the toughest around, which means they don't break down, and it's why they're also called forever chemicals. And the effect of that is that they build up or bioaccumulate in the environment and are of particular concern in our food chain and ultimately ourselves. And you might have seen recent articles based on a study that was looking at well, frankly, an alarming buildup in human breast milk. But there are articles based on science coming out now weekly, if not daily. So the big worry about these chemicals is that they've been proven to cause a range of dangers to health. They methylate our DNA. They alter the DNA's histone structure. In other words, they are cancer-causing agents. They also disrupt normal endocrine function and cause reproductive issues and birth defects. And in fact, I've just picked one report here, but you know, again, there are reports coming out weekly. The cost of inaction regarding environmental damage and human health is staggering. A recent report had it at about 250 billion euros per annum. That's just in Europe. Okay, so hopefully enough of context setting. What is MICROSAIC doing and why am I so excited about it? I think really probably pictures paint 1,000 words. So on the left-hand side, take the traditional approach to chemical analysis, which is large, a large, expensive, traditional centralized lab. And that is often well removed from the point of need. Versus right, which is our technology in the back of a car, in progress of analyzing water samples. But the real power isn't just so-called being point of need per se, but really we're in a position to install hundreds of these units through an ecosystem, really to measure slices either geographically or through time to monitor actually what is going on. You remember that complex picture I showed you. Now, with the addition of artificial intelligence, AI, we can start to make models and predict outcomes. So now we don't just detect what has happened, we can start to predict what's gonna happen. Market sizing is a tough one. I know you'll probably give me some questions on that. Indicative numbers are below. I mean, even if we installed a small number, say in leading water treatment centers, let alone through the ecosystem, we're looking at a potentially large install base. Naturally, with our partners at Modern Water, subsidiary of DeepVerge, who are already talking to water authorities, utilities companies, we've got a good line of sight. And whereas before MICROSAIC didn't have this unique channel advantage, with the commercialization agreement we signed with DeepVerge, we now do. And I especially imagine a very promising potential in China. So moving on to the collaboration with Swansea, which we put out as an RNS reach on Tuesday of this week. This is a fantastic opportunity for us in a number of ways. Number one, it helps us inform our commercial rollout of our water detection systems. The collaboration itself is going to involve environmental agencies and other industrial partners in the UK. It's going to involve lab analysis, real-time screening for remote samples, and also monitoring in established utilities companies. So quite a spread, I'm sure you'll agree. It's going to aim to improve water monitoring efficiency also by embedding our technology within an AI, remember, artificial intelligence layer. And data is something we talk about a lot. And it's just another example of where our business model is changing for the better and at speed. Finally, actually, as an ex-scientist, I find the last part really exciting in that our technology is going to be used to inform the link between chemicals such as PFAS to specific genetic changes in the human genome, and that is incredible. So in summary, with Swansea, we get industrial partners, we advance our technical proposition to market, and we inform leading edge medical science. And what's not to love about all that? But actually, the Swansea collaboration interleaves really nicely with our collaboration in Eco Water OS, which we joined by signing up with DeepVerge. And the objectives here are exactly aligned. So for remote and multiple screening modes of smart water detection. So You know, as of today, I'm confident that MicroSaic's leading the way in informing environmental screening and monitoring science, and also establishing its technology as the first choice of detection. There is no other mass spectrometry equipment out there today that is doing this. I'm going to talk to you about business model because I keep mentioning business model. This application with PFAS or forever chemicals represents just one of many environmental applications and also human health applications. But frankly, why is it important? Now, obviously, it's important for solving real world problems. That's why we get up every day and go to work. But also, there's got to be a clear commercial benefit. Now, on the left hand side there's obviously an inverted triangle. And what I'll do is attempt to describe it. We, as MicroSaic, used to focus very much at the bottom of that triangle. So shipping boxes are not really focused on solutions. So typically these were long sales cycles, circa a year to make a sale. Very science and instrumentation focused. It was very cyclic, prone to risks, as we found out during the pandemic. We had a low degree of consumables and service revenue off the back of it because our intermediary partners took most of that, and it had very little real world relevance, and it was simple order fulfillment. We didn't really have a clear idea of what the end user beyond the intermediary was doing. So move forward to this year, we are bringing more capability, detection, technology at the base of pyramid, which is absolutely fantastic. But we mustn't lose sight that we are absolutely laser focused on the vertical, right? So we see the technology we're bringing to market as an enabler, not just a product sale. We don't want to go back there. We are committed to solving real world problems and offering often turnkey solutions, and we are in the business of generating insightful data and not just throwing an instrument over the wall. The revenue streams will be less cyclical because there is an ongoing relationship with the customer through the provision of service and data, and therefore we've got a much more exciting and high growth strategy, but it's de-risked. So just finally then, just a quick update, because we were with you only, I think, about 3 weeks ago. In other news, we're moving rapidly on our patient-centric diagnostics venture. And, you know, I can't stress enough what a massive departure from old MicroSaic and an opportunity for future MicroSaic this is. To get a mass spec medically certified in its own right is truly significant. But the follow-on potential in human health is incredibly exciting, as you can imagine. We're leading with an application looking at the therapeutic administration of drugs in vitro, in other words, bedside, and that will be in hospitals. And we hope to have a product in the market in 2022, which is actually going at some speed. We are also collaborating with Modern Water, subsidiary of DeepVerge, across a range of areas in detection and monitoring. And we truly augment their offering with a strong value proposition, with their already strong value proposition in water and in other areas, looking at not only chemicals but other bad actors in water. And the way that DeepVerge works is very much along the lines of that business model I've just described to you. And then some hot off the press data showing our progress in biologics. So this is where we're monitoring the progress of a bioreactor in real time. Now, that may not sound a lot, but biologics are the drugs that typically form, for example, the basis of vaccines, or it can be monoclonal treatments to either, say, for example, cure cancer or treat chronic diseases. So these drugs are the new breed of drug in biopharma. The key thing here is that our mass spec technology is embedded in a closed loop system, and actually the results from our mass spec inform immediately the dosing of, for example, feedstocks based on certain real-time data of what's going in the bioreactor as the drug is being made by these genetically engineered cells. So it really is quite incredible. You know, a mass spec informing a process analytical technology is, I think, a first. Uniquely as well, we can measure a whole range of compounds which incumbent technologies just don't offer. This means we can take an already complex process and simplify the decision making inordinately. We are talking to large pharma about programs of gaining overall approval, which would lead to then company-wide rollout of this technology. And I would anticipate 2022, but we should be placing units this year. So there is a lot more to come. I am very positive about the even short-term future in MICROSAIC. We are knocking some fantastic targets in those verticals in environmental, human health, and also in diversified. And I hope to be on this platform very soon, talking to you about more developments. Oh, and with that, I should turn the camera back on and take questions.
Glenn, thanks so much for that presentation. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Glenn and Bevan take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you that the recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation is ended, you will be redirected for the opportunity to provide the feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Glenn, Bevan, perhaps before we move into some of the live Q&A that we've had come through, we did have a number of pre-submitted questions. So perhaps if I can just start off the Q&A session with that would be great. The first one reads as follows, and I know we have touched on it just as we've come to the end of the presentation, but any more colour would be great. What exciting products do you have in the pipeline?
So I suppose the way I'd answer that is remember our focus on the verticals. So products doesn't always equal technology. That said, we are bringing to the fore more technology in the way that we do mass spec, in the way that we integrate with partners, and the way that we develop the software. But the real key thing is, because we have now a lot of the technology in place, we can very quickly churn out applications for say turnkey solutions in environmental, as an example. Mass spec is a technique you can look at a whole range of things. PFAS is just one example. So expect a continuing addition to those verticals. That's probably all I can say. Obviously, we're in a competitive situation. I've got to be slightly careful what I say, but yeah, we are absolutely, we've got a stuffed pipeline, more to come.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Next one reads as follows: when do you anticipate closing a doctor's medical for use in surgery product sale? Yeah, so the first is obviously the companion diagnostics, which is something we announced last month. Sorry, this month. And that will be completed by 2022. So actually that's very fast, because these to achieve this regulation can often be very slow. Although a lot of regulatory bodies are speeding things up, just as pharma is speeding things up. Now that will be in hospitals. We are also I can't say too much again because of NDA, but we are also looking at other diagnostic treatment areas which can augment that. But we will certainly be there by 2022. That's great. And the final pre-submitted question we have here is: I assume that MICROSAIC is working quite closely with Deep Verge, who are, I believe, supplying a Chinese company with equipment for water treatment. Please could you expand on that joint venture, if that's what it could be called, and how that could impact MICROSAIC?
Yeah, no. Obviously, the joint venture is between DeepVerge and the company in China. So we're not formally in that in the heads of terms, should we say, for the joint venture. But that said, I mean, clearly we signed with DeepVerge as channel and collaboration partners, and as part of that channel, that joint venture will be a fantastic opportunity for MICROSAIC, because, as I said in the presentation, you know, we augment the technology that Modern Water and DeepVerge already has. So, yeah, absolutely. And China in environmental monitoring is a really good opportunity, not just because of the size of the country, etc., all the usual stuff you hear about, you know, the investment going in. But remote monitoring is so important because you know, you can't just take a sample and send it away and get a result in a day. It's a massive country, and so the deployment of many monitoring devices along water courses, for example, or the coastline, or you know, soil remediation for building, whatever it is, will be very, very important in those countries. It's often, you know, it's often tempting to think of the world from your own perspective, and the UK is a very small space. I don't know if there are any people from outside the UK. You know, you get into a country the size of China or the US, and you realize how important remote monitoring is.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Glenn. That does conclude the pre-submitted questions. Glenn Bevan, also, we've had a number of questions in from investors during the meeting. May I ask you just to click on that Q&A tab, and then, just where appropriate to do so, if I could ask you to read out the question and just respond, that'd be fantastic then.
Yeah, by all means. Nathan G, hi, who's your closest rival that also produces miniaturized mass spectrometers, and what differs you from the other companies that do so? Yep, thanks, Nathan. So there's an awful amount there's an awful amount of marketing out there where a lot of companies will say that they are miniaturized. The beauty with MICROSAIC is everything is within the box, and it is a very small package that you can honestly deploy to remote locations. So when, you know, I would say, you know, look on the internet, look on Google, type in mass spectrometry, and you'll get the usual kinds of companies, you know, SciEx, Thermo, Waters. But MICROSAIC is the only one that truly offers a very small but high spec solution. So I don't know whether I answered that, but as I said earlier on, I mean, some of the areas we're working in really is a first in mass spectrometry, and it's a first because of our value proposition. Simon C, what do you do with all the data you collect, and do you own it? Well, within the model, say for example with DeepVerge and Modern Water, we would potentially own that data. It depends on the install, obviously. In a biologics infrastructure, in a big pharma, you know, they would own that data, clearly, because that would be very sensitive. But I think when you're participating in AI and modeling, you know, you start to go up that pyramid I was showing you about, and certainly I think you know, ownership of data becomes more attractive and potentially lucrative. How well is the new business model working? Yeah, really well. I think the way I would describe it, very well it's working, is that because we are not talking just about the technology and mass spec, and let's face it, who cares? You know, we are talking about the real world problems. So, you know, we are talking to potential collaborators and partners about how do we improve monitoring for PFAS chemicals. Because there is a grant, for example, to go and, you know, solve the problem for an environment agency or whoever it is, and that kind of messaging is much more effective than as I said, just focusing on the technology. And actually, again, I think the difference between a lot of the larger companies is that they are very technically oriented. It's a very much a B2B sale. Although they are bigger, there's not much on the sort of end use problem. Are there new patents in the pipeline? Yes, there are, particularly in software. Sorry, that was Simon W. Nathan G. Cash flow financing. Am I correct that you are fully funded up to profitability? Correct. Simon W. Is there a plan for NH use of the breathalyzer? I mean, this is something that really DeepVerge is leading, and I think probably it's best to address that question to DeepVerge.
Glenn Risner mentioned what are the goals for the next 6 months. I suppose, we are investing in people. We've recently taken on 5 new people for a company that has just under 20 to 25. And these are all key areas around commercialization and R&D. I think sales is a focus. Last year, we all know was terrible. But this year, we're really benchmarking against 2019. We still have COVID there, and we're looking forward to when we can travel to international markets to meet our customers. But again, I think that the key thing is sales, and also collaborations. The last count, and I'm only a bean counter, we had about 10 collaborations, and I think the challenge there is identifying those which will produce the results the quickest, and to focus on those in some interesting areas.
Very interesting. I know you guys on the call will be very interested to know what those are. Has a significant portion of the tech spend and development already been made, Chris C? And when do you see significant revenue coming on board and break even? Well, as we're funded through. We will see an inflection certainly this year, but significantly, I think, in 2022 when biologics comes online. We start the diagnostics venture in China, and sort of the key account deployments with Modern Water.
Chris M said, what is the Singer price target on MICROSAIC? That there isn't one, Chris. At the moment, there's no financials in the market. As we progress through this year and we get back to a new normal, shall we say, we'll be looking to put some figures in the market, but we take advice from our nomad and brokers on that. But let's just see how it unfolds.
And then, Chris, the final question: any traction in India with your technology? Not as much as I'd like, actually, but I think that will change, because obviously, if you look at our verticals again, human health and environmental, with obviously what's going on there right now, I think that's only going to change, quite honestly. I mentioned earlier on as well, with the increased channel sign up with DeepVerge, I mean, that's only going to change. Part of MICROSAIC's challenge historically was getting that larger channel behind us, which we now have. MS Simon W. MS is extremely undervalued. I assume you mean MICROSAIC rather than mass spectrometry. Do you have any estimates for the next few years? Significant growth, absolutely. I think we found our rhythm and our cadence. We see the growth. We're having some fantastic conversations. We are really gelling with end markets, with our messaging, with our offerings. So absolutely, I think it's undervalued. But I think this is the standard response, isn't it? If I knew what the share price would be, I wouldn't be here. But it is significantly undervalued, is my opinion. I think I meant to add.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Bevan. You've literally covered off all the questions, so thank you very much indeed for taking the time to do that. And if any further questions do come in, of course, Glenn and Bevan will have the opportunity to review those. Glenn, just before we redirect investors to give you some feedback, perhaps I could just ask for a few final comments from you, please.
Yeah, well, once again, thank you for your support. Thank you for attending this. I hope you've seen that even since the last time we spoke, there is significant progress and momentum in MICROSAIC. We are going to be on the platform frequently with updates in all these exciting areas in human environmental health and in diversified technologies. They are top-hitting subject areas that we'll be gaining successes in, and I'm absolutely convinced, we're going to knock it out of the park. Thanks for listening.
That's fantastic. Glenn, Bevan, thank you again for updating investors today, and we look forward to hosting you again.
Thank you.
Please could I ask investors not to close the session, as you'll be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and is greatly valued by the company. On behalf of MICROSAIC Systems PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session.